As we enter into the final home stretch of this incredible Masechta learning Shvias Chos for Shlem Shal Yosef and Frei the Shom Deal of Zim Bechles Chom Asiva Sam Avlu Masmin the Chaim Shishum and Malko Blashav Fegu Shirchan Chavelea Chavelea Basaradina as well as Choshuv Zachaim the word of Zibas Rachol Shlomo Belivis Dava Ifek Bedeli Shem Ben Chayim Luyutis Bas Sima Malka. And now we pick it up in the bottom of Kuf Testament Bees. We're in the middle of discussing the Shita of Rav with regard to a Ketana who becomes a Gedolah, was married while she was a Ketana. And now the question is there a requirement for the husband to sleep together with his wife when she becomes a Gedolah in order for her to retain the din of a biblical marriage and Nisuin Da'araisa? So asks the Gemara 3 lines on the bottom of Savar Rav. And does Rav indeed hold like we think he has been holding until now? That Iba'alin, Ilai Ba'alai? Is Rav of the opinion that the only time there's going to be a din kedushin de'araisa, full-fledged marriage, is if they're together after she becomes a Gedolah? But ask the Gemara 2 lines to the bottom of Itmar, but we learned, Ketana Shleim Miyana, if a Ketana does not refuse the subject of this parak, if the Ketana does not walk away from the marriage, Vig Dila, and she grows up, V'amda v'niseis, and after she grows up, what does she do? She goes and marries someone else. Amda v'niseis, to someone else. Rav Amar Ein Sricha Get Misheni. She doesn't need a get from the second person. Seemingly, simply because she's married to a man. The first guy, it doesn't make a difference whether they were together or not, seemingly, according to the opinion of Rav. She grows up, she can't go marry someone else, she's a married woman. Ushmol Amar Sricha Get Misheni. And as we turn over to Kuf Yudam and Alf today's daf, the Gemara now articulates, my love is what's going on here, not the loy ball, that they were not together, and yet Rav says they're full-fledged marriage. Says the Gemara, loy debal, the case where they were together. Debal asked the Gemara, my time with the Shmuel. How could Shmuel say his din? How could Shmuel say that she's married to the second person that she needs a get? They were bal, they were fully fledged married to the first man. Explains the Gemara, Kasavar. Shmuel holds that when they're together, it was with the mindset of the original Kedushin, and therefore, even after she becomes a Gedolah, it's still not a full-fledged marriage, and therefore, right, the husband never intended to have a full-fledged marriage because he has das for the original Kedushin Derabanan, and therefore when she goes and marries someone else, there is a din deraisa marriage that could indeed take effect. And now the Gemara asks 1 second, V'afligu chaba chadazim the Rav and Shmuel already had this machlokes the Itmar. If they got married with a condition v'kontastam, and then they did nisuin, they did kedusha, they did nisuin without any stipulation. So Rav Amar tzichamenu get, Shmuel Amar tzichamenu get. Rav says they do not. They need a get, and Shmuel says not. What's the machlokes? Rav Amar tzichamenu get even din nasva achli achli tonight. When they go and do nisuin, and they are showing that the original Tanai is no longer binding, and they did a regular Nisuin. But Shmuel Amar, no, why? Says Shmuel, you got fully married now? No, you didn't, because your mindset was on the original marriage, which was not a full marriage, we had a Tanai. So says the Gemara, this machlokes Rav and Shmuel already was had. Explains the Gemara, Sricha, we indeed need both machlokes MD Marahi, because if we only learned the case over there, I would have thought over there there's a stipulation, it's a spoken out condition, and therefore but in our case of the Ketana, maybe Rav would agree to Shmuel that the mere fact that they slept together doesn't necessarily mean they were consummating the marriage, and maybe their mindset was on the original Kedushin. If it only said our case, I would have thought Bahakam or Shmuel. That's what Shmuel says his din, that they were together, they had mindset of the original Kedushin Aval Bahach. But in the case over there of the Tanai, the Rav, maybe you'll agree to Rav that when they go and they do Nisuin, they're being Meichel, the original condition, stipulation, Sricha, and therefore says the Gemara, we need both dinim. So we had a question on Rav, we deflected the question, we wondered why they had to argue 2 times, and we explained the necessary reason. So says the Gemara, now let's delve a bit deeper into the opinion of Rav. Does Rav indeed hold the same kasha we started off with today? Does Rav indeed hold that the only time their full-fledged marriage is if after she becomes a Gedela they sleep together, and if not, not? There was a story in Arash, and there was someone, a Yasam, who was Mekadesh while she was a Ketana, Vigadla, and she grew up, and she grew up. And what happened? And she was sitting on the bridal chair, she was ready, waiting to go out to Nisuin. And another man came and married to this woman. So this woman was married as a Ketana. She's waiting to go out to Nisuin, and another man swoops her up. Rav Bruna, Rav Chananel, Talmidei de Rav Avi Hassam. So these Talmidim of Rav were there, and they did not require a get from the second man. Seemingly the reason being that according to Rav, they're married full-fledged even without being together. Again, we started off today that the Shita of Rav is only when they sleep together, when she's a Gedayla, then they're full marriage. But I asked the Gemara, we see clearly not, because they never were together. She's waiting to do Nisuin, and after she becomes a Gedayla, and yet the second marriage has no effect. Why would the second marriage have no effect? Why would she not need a get for the second husband? Because she's full-fledged married to the first husband. How is she full-fledged married to the first husband? Must be because even without being together, even without Tashmish, is considered a full-fledged marriage. Explains the Gemara, no, in this place, Kurz and Rash, they would do something interesting. They first would do Nisuin and have Tashmish, and only later would they go out on this bridal chair. So indeed, they were already together. Says the Gemara, another answer of Ashi Amar, who I say shalaika hagen, figure asu boy shalaika hagen. Says Rav Ashi, no. Really, in a normal case, the din might be different. But because in this case, what happened? This second guy was inappropriate. What are you doing? She's waiting to go to Nisuin and you snatch her up? So we act inappropriately with him as well, and we say that there was no marriage at all. Ask the Gemara, Vavkin Rabbanan, or the Kedusha Minei, and the Rabbanan say, no, you think you're married? No. We're saying because you acted inappropriately, there was no marriage. The classical kasha, if they got married with a bia, how could the Rabbanan undo the tashmish? Explains their Gemara. The Rabbanan could consider this act of intercourse as a zenos and not actually being a marriage. And that is the psak halacha. Going back into the case of the Mishnah, that if one marries a Ketana and the older sister has a situation of Yibam, what do? We tell the Ketana to do Miyah unto her husband, and then the Yavam is able to do Yibam with the older sister. And we continue with the Mishnah on the bottom of Kaf Yudam and Aleph, says the Mishnah. Someone is married to two Yisaimas Ketanas who are Ketanas, and he dies. If one of the brothers is either boil or does chalitza to one of them, the co-wife is pattered. And similarly, if there were two ketanas who were charashais, deaf mutes, ketana shecharashais, if there were a case of two charashais or ketana vicharashais, a case of a ketana and a charashas, then in that case, be together with one of them does not pater the other one. Let's say one was a healthy, full functioning individual, and the other was a deaf mute. Then be together with the bikeches, be together with the healthy girl. That's full fledged. So pater is the other one, but not vice versa. Gedailo ketana. If we have a case of two situations of Yibam, one's a Gadol and one's a Ketana. Bia is a Gadol, Pater is a Ketana. Then what's the situation? The Bia of the older one does indeed pater up the younger one, but then Bia is a Ketana, Pater is Hagedoila. So says the Gemara, let's go into the first part of the Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah, when we have a case of charashais, a case of a deaf mute, and we're trying to figure out what is the status of such a girl with regard to Yibam and Chalitza. But I ask the Gemara fundamentally, is that true? You're telling me that by charashas you could do Chalitza? But now we learned in the Mishnah, if either the charesh, the male Daf Yud does chalitza, or if the female Daf Yud accepts the chalitza, or a ketana, it's nothing. So how could the Mishnah seemingly say that there is yes chalitza by such a person? Explains Amar Rav Gidol Amar Rav, 3 lines on the white lines. Abiyah, it's going in the case of biyah, not of chalitza. That if the chareshes has an act of intercourse, then it could do something. But it's true, your chalitza wouldn't do anything. That's teretz number 1. Rav Amar Now Afilu Tema Chalitza Kan Charesh Mikara Kan Bigechas Vachach Nischarsha says Rava, a fundamental idea. If one is chareshes his entire life, then you're right. Then there's no das, there's no mind. Then she can't do chalitza. But if one was a pikeches, was smart, I shouldn't say what I just said. I take that back. One more time. Rava says, "Afilu tema chalitza." One is chareshes meikara, and such a person could yes do chalitza. Excuse me, I was incorrect. Because she was always without knowledge, so the same way she fell to Yibum, the same way she was married, that marriage could be undone with her accepting chalitza. But the other cases where she was a pikeches, she was full functioning, she was a healthy girl, and then she became a cherish. In such a case, her current level of das is lacking, and therefore she would not be able to perform chalitza. Why? Charesh is meikara kechid al hachi nafak kechid al hachi nafak. When it's a chareshes the whole time, the same way she entered, she can leave. But in the case of bikeches v'achach nischarsha, loy, why not? Because she's lacking the recital of the chalitza. Originally she had das and she was able to recite it. Now she does not. So she's lacking that fundamental detail of chalitza. And therefore, says the Gemara, she would not be able to do chalitza if she originally had das. Ask the Gemara on this din of Rabbah. Eisvei Abaye asks Abaya, are you telling me that chaletz says, again, we're in the second, it says Rava, it's Rabbah. Again, let's just be clear, 3 lines from the white lines, when it said Rava Amar, the gears on the side changes it to Rabbah, so we're going to call it Rabbah. So I ask, are you telling me that one who was chareshes the whole time could do chalitza? But now we learned in the Mishnah. We have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. 1 boy and 1 girl is healthy, 1 boy and 1 girl is a deaf mute, and each marries its type. So the cherish who's married to the chareshes dies. What does the brother do as a bikeach? He has to marry her. Let's say the other brother dies who's fully functioning. What does the cherish do? You get married and he's never able to divorce her. So says the Gemara, and yet, what did this Mishnah say? In as we turn over to Kaf Yudam and Beis, clearly the Mishnah is only allowing you to Kenisa to do Yibam B'chayleitz Lai. So the clear implication of the Mishnah is that even a Chareshes Meikara can only do Yibam and Achalitza. Answers the Gemara, the classical Teretz Lai, that's what the Mishnah was talking about. But the Bikeches V'achan is Charsha. Talking about a case where originally she had Das, and that's the reason why now she cannot do Chalitza. Tashema, let's continue asking on Rab. And in this case, the Bikeach is married to the Chareshes dies. What does the full functioning marriage do? What if the full functioning marriage dies? My love articulates the Gemara. If he is a Bikeach and then became a Cherish, we assume his wife is the same. Of course, the reason of such assumption is not a simple assumption the Rishonim discussed, but either way, and yet, so we see that even though he's chareshes the whole time, still, you could only do kaines ibam and nachalitza. Answers the Gemara. Classically, the Iri Hakadisa, they do not necessarily have to be the same. Just because he was a charesh meikara does not mean charesh meikara does not mean she is the same. Eisvei asks the Gemara further. Eisvei shnei achen echo bikech v'echa chayrish with 1 bikech and 1 chayrish nisuyin shnei achayoy zachas bichas v'achas chareshes meis chayrish v'chareshes mayasa bikech b'ikeches teiti mishom achay zisha. There's nothing to be done. It's your wife's sister. You're not allowed to marry her. It's an erva and finished. What should he do? He should divorce his own wife. And this other person he's also forever. So articulates the Gemara, if you're going to tell me that his case is as well dealing with a case that were fully functioning and then they became a deaf mute. Is he able to divorce her? If they became a shaita, you cannot get divorced. So Elalav, what the case must be talking about, if we see there's a potential divorce, and now it says the Gemara again, we're assuming that everyone's on the same page over here, and yet they're all chareshes meikara, they never had das utanan, and still what did the Mishnah say 25 lines down? The first word line is gabe nachri is koine zid chayle sloi. Still after everything is said and done, we see only koines yivam and not chalitza. Ishtrik Rabbah was quiet, he had no response. But Kioslik made Rav Yosef had a response for Rabbah. Why are you asking a question on Rabbah from here? Which what? What's your big question on Rabbah? Rabbah could have deflected your question by differentiating between the two cases. That one, the Achayos, the sisters, were always Charashais. But why the Nachriyos, the other case, they were pichos full functioning and then became a chayrish. Elo said Rav Yosef, if you want to have a good kasha in Rabbah, this is the kasha. And similarly, in all of these permutations and cases, Min chalitza, min yibum. There's no chalitza nor yibum. But but if the women were not related, then yechnesu, get married. You can get divorced. So now in this whole brisa says Rav Yosef, if the case is talking about they were healthy originally and they became a chayresh, can he indeed divorce her? But as we saw, so if we see there's a potential divorce possible, it can't be that they were chayresh the whole time. And that they were originally full functioning and then became a chayrish. They are full time a chayrish, and yet what do we see when they in chayrish and meikara? Do not have chayrish and meikara. V'katani menachzin kitzch nesuin yikantu yichal nesuin yichal zu loy. So tiyofta derabba tiyofta. This final brisa was too verbose. There's no way to deflect it. We see clearly in the brisa that it has to be talking about chershe meikara, and yet what did the brisa teach us? That there's only an option of yichnesu and not an option of chalitza. And we finish off today's shir 3 lines from the Y line. Says the Gemara quoting the Mishnah, Kitana v'chareshes, and the Mishnah taught us that if he's together with one of the wives, it does not patter up the tzara. Amar Rav Nachman Ashkachtei l'Ravadu Rav l'Rav Chanun Chasnei Diasvi Kamikavi Akvasa. They were sitting and they were learning Torah together. Where B'Shoka de Pompadisa. In the Shukah Pompadisa on the first wide line. V'Amri, and they said the following: Ha, Ditzanan Kan v'Charish Zein Bias Achad Ben Paderes Arasa. Our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah mean? This was what they were sitting and talking about in the Shukah Pompadisa. Hani immediately explains the Gemara: Did Nafla Le Me'echav Bikeach, where it fell from a brother who was full functioning, a Bikeach smart, to Layadinon, and therefore we're not sure which one is better. There's 2 options here. What's the question? Who does he want to do? The brother to do Yibam to? There's 2 options. This is a Ketana and a Chareshes. So what's the question? Explains the Gemara. Why? Because when this Ketana grows up, she's a full-fledged Pikaches, she has full das. So when she grows up, she'll be a full functioning member of society. Or maybe not, says the Gemara. But maybe B'chareshes nicha. Maybe right now he's happier to be together with the Chareshes. Why? The Gedaili. She's a Gedailo, Bas B'iyah, and she can have acts of Tashmish. So we're not sure which one is better. Vol Navlech of Chayrish. Vadai bechareshes. But what happens if the achiv chayrish, the deaf mute brother, falls? Vadai bechareshes nichalev. He's a chayrish. He certainly wants the chareshes. Why? The basmi ubasmi nahi. Because not only is she a gedayla, but she's also the same type. He's a chayrish and she's a chareshes. V'hamina luhu anon. I Rav Nachman was sitting there and heard all this, and I said, afilu nafla me'achav chayrish na misafke. Even in that case, I'm not sure. Maybe you'd rather have a katana that's eventually going to grow up, and that was the suffix that Rav Nachman introduced in the Shukah Pampadisa. Says the Gemara, Kitzad Taka Nasam. So we saw in the Mishnah that being together with one of these girls does not release the Sarah, does not part the Sarah from Yevamos Chalitza. So I asked the Gemara, 4 lines to the bottom, so what are you supposed to do? How do you get rid of their Zika so they could go marry someone else? She should get married, divorce. And the Ketana waits till she grows up. Then she could do Chalitza. And based over this, we learn from over here. There's a fundamental difference, says the Gemara. We're really going to conclude with this point of Rav Chisda, explaining the Shita of Rav, that a chareshes is different than a ketana. A chareshes is kenuya u'mishureres, partially acquired and partially not acquired. Whereas a ketana is fully acquired, ve'enai kenuya, but we're not sure if there's a full acquisition. Meaning, there's a suffix. The ketana were misupik if they're acquired, if there's a kinyan. The chareshes were not misupik. It's a vadai, but it's not full-fledged. And therefore, what? If you're going to tell me that a chareshes is a suffix, we're in doubt if there's a kinyan. And the ketana is kinuya mishureres. And the ketana is the person that is acquired but left over. It's a vadai, but it's not 100%. If that was the case, chareshes amai koines who might see a beget. Why would we say in the case of chareshes they should get married and then get divorced? As we turn over to Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, they should say married Mimanashach. Why? If there's a kinyan originally, if originally the deaf mute was married fully, then now she'll have a full-fledged acquisition as well. And if they were never married, there's no yibum bechlal. So what's the problem? Let them do yibum and stay married, asks the Gemara. We're going to have to just go a job further. V'chitema says Rav Chisda ketana mai tantin ashetegdo v'tachloitz teisiv gabei. Says Rav Chisda, maybe we say the same thing by a ketana. Why is she waiting to do chalitza when she goes up? Why doesn't she do teisiv gabei? Why can't she stay married to her? And the same question, if they're married to the first one, she's married to him. He lav kanuya nachrusa ba'alma. Explains the Gemara, you know why? Imkain chareshes b'mai tepik. With what will the chareshes be released from the zika? Because she cannot do chalitza, so we require the ketana to wait to grow up to do chalitza, so that the chareshes, other co-wife, does not get messed over. We're going to stop over here. We'll pick it up from Rav Shishas, who's going to prove to us this din of the classification of the ketana versus the chareshes.